Welcome, the Zoom lady. Welcome, everybody, nonprofit leaders. I'm Nancy Manning, founder of Power Your Mission and Austin Nonprofit Meetup. And our guest today is Christian Bell Onyemali, something like that.
Yeah, you're close, very, very close. Christian Bell Onyemali.
Thank you for the correction. All right, Christian, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much, Nancy, for having me. I'm so excited to be here today. Let me just start with basic education background. I have lived in Austin since 2009. I came here for grad school. I'm originally from Tulsa, Oklahoma. My educational background is I'm an HBCU graduate. I graduated from Spelman College with a BA in psychology. And then I took a brief tour to UC Santa Barbara and got a master's in education before then going to UT and did a PhD in education policy and planning. Although I think the program name has changed since I was there, but that was the program that I was in at that time. So that's my educational background. Work experience, though, I am a former teacher. I used to teach first grade at Houston ISD many, many years ago. Just being in the education system really made me realize that I wanted to learn more about the inequities that we have in our education system, what's the reason for them, and how are we addressing them, which is actually what led me to going to grad school at UT. So while I was at UT, I actually got the opportunity to work for Austin ISD in the research and evaluation department. And that's where I found my love for evaluation, that is a field that we work in, and that I really like that. I like being able to help people understand what they're doing, what's the results of it, and then use that information to improve or to continue doing what's really working well. So I worked in education, I worked in research and evaluation since I think it's 2010. So it's been quite a while now, 2010, starting at Austin ISD, like I said before, but then I also have worked for a large charter school network and then also a couple of large nonprofit organizations, the most recent of which is 4.0, which is my current employer, where I am the inaugural, the very first director of evaluation and learning.
Well, tell us about 4.0 schools. What's the mission and what do you do?
Yeah, so 4.0 is a nonprofit organization that invests coaching, community, curriculum, and cash into people who have new ideas in the education space. So it could be that someone decides, hey, I really see that there's a need to address early childhood education. So I want to create a school. So we help them start to think from the beginning of their idea, how to test the idea to see if there's a demand for it, and then go on to another stage to see if their idea actually works the way that they're intending, and just taking them through the cycle of from the very beginning of having an idea to actually seeing if it works or not, and doing that in a small way to start off with, right? Because a lot of times we have anyone who's on this live or watching it later will know that we want to start something and go big in the beginning, and that's not necessarily the best way to approach the work. We want to start small to understand if you're making the impact that you're intending to make, if people are wanting it, if it's something that the community needs and both wants, and they're demonstrating that by showing up for it. So that's what we do, is help people who have ideas in education. So it could be a school, it could be an after-school program, it could be something like a product. We have people who create products like some sort of resource guide or a tool of some sort to address issues in education. So we run a pretty wide gamut of what we mean by improving education. It doesn't necessarily have to happen within the education space. It could happen outside of it as well.
It's a real giant mission, and I would love to hear more about it. This is what frustrates me every week when I find people like yourself doing this amazing work. But I know that people also are joining today to hear about the logic model. And you have said it's a powerful tool that every nonprofit should include in their toolkit. Can you tell us why that is?
Yes, logic models are my favorite thing. They're something that if you go to my LinkedIn profile, you read recommendations about me, that's what people talk about, because I really do believe in them, in the importance of them. Your logic model is basically a visual tool that tells you what are the things and resources that we're putting into our program, what do we what are we, what's our intention behind the reason why we're doing those things? What is the goal of them? What are we intending to see in terms of change, mindset, behavior, and skills in participants? And then in the long term, what do all of those skills and mindsets actually lead to? So it's really like a theory of what you're doing and what your end goal is for all of the work that you're doing in your organization. A lot of nonprofits really struggle with the logic model concept because it's something that really we should be doing at the very beginning stages of creating our organizations. You also use it during the implementation stage and then your evaluation stage at the end, but it's something that you should really be including from the beginning and using throughout your whole work cycle. It's not it's a living document. It's a process of clarifying, here's what our theory is. And you're basically saying, does our theory actually work? Like, do we have the data that says, this is what we're expecting to see happening in our nonprofit? These are the things that we're putting into it, the resources. Are those resources, are we doing those things? And what's the result of that? And just being able to have that data constantly informing the work of your organization throughout its life. So that's something, that's why logic models to me are just so important for grounding your work, for bringing your team together, and also being able to communicate to external audiences as well.
And before we move to that about communications, I was just gonna say, I told you I had a little sleep last night. Oh, one of the things about logic models that might scare people is it does make you test your own assumptions, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That can be, that's sometimes why I can feel a little anxious, for people. It's just like, I think this is right. We have to test it. What if what we said was wrong? What if we actually, our assumption was incorrect? And so there's an emotional part to it, right? Of like, you're invested in the work of creating this organization. You had this assumption. And if it's quote unquote wrong, or if it's not quite accurate, there can be some feelings around that. So yeah, I definitely want to name that that's why it can be challenging for some people. But the thing about it is when I talk about data, it's not, I don't see it as like a punitive. We're not using data in a punitive way, right? Like you're bad or you're good, your nonprofit's good or bad. It's like, no, you're actually using this information to improve. Okay, you saw, for example, you wanted to do a program and reach a certain number of people. You thought it would have these intended outcomes from it. And then you collect data, you look at it, analyze it, and it turns out that was incorrect. Okay, that can be disappointing, yes, because you put in time and effort, but then what does that mean for you going forward? So how do you now change what you're doing given the data that you have? So ultimately, data to me is a tool, and the logic model is a tool for you to test and to refine and to make things better for your community, right? Because that's ultimately who you're serving. So if you're not serving them in the way that they need to be served, you have to sort of, you need to be using some information to help guide you there.
And one of the ways I think you could avoid the disappointment of a wrong assumption is through what I've been learning as participatory evaluation, so that you're involving the community you serve right from the get-go about what does the community really need, and do they think this program is really going to solve that problem or address that need? So is that right? That if you include more of your community from the get-go, you're probably going to be less disappointed?
Yeah, absolutely. That is 100% right, Nancy. That's something that we talk, that's a huge part of the curriculum for 4.0, and just how I approach this work as well is you have to always be keeping in mind that you're working with the community and you're not doing something to them, or for them. It's with them. And so really keeping that in mind will make sure you're on track when you have an assumption about, hey, let's try to do this new thing. Did the community say that they want that? Do they need that? Is the way that you're creating it, do they feel like that's going to meet the intended goals, or that's going to really help them? So really remembering to center the community in what you're doing.
I listened to the Ethical Rainmaker podcast, and there's a gal, LaFleur, I can't remember her full name, but it's called White Women as Gatekeepers. And in there, she says, we want to help, but that's merely the sunny side of control. I love that phrasing, so don't make those assumptions that it's going to be helpful. You've got to involve the people you're serving. Okay, so how many ways, or what are the ways that the logic model can be used?
Yeah. So like I mentioned before, the first is in your program design as you're creating your program, starting up. If you have a, say, for instance, your organization, you have a new program you want to start, use your logic model to be really clear, like what is the ultimate goal that we have for this program? Okay, so what do we want people to demonstrate in knowledge, mindset, and skills that will get them to that ultimate goal? Okay, so if we want them to demonstrate these knowledge, mindsets, and skills, what are the activities that we need to be doing to make sure that they're doing that and they have that? And then also that means what kind of resources are we going to put into it? What kind of classes are we going to have? How many people do we need to be doing them? How much money, do we need to put into this? So you use it at that stage. And then you can also use it as you're implementing your program, which is what a lot of my experience is once you have your logic model and you have this sort of sense of what we expect to happen, here's the data we need to collect. Do not let your logic model just sit in a Google Drive or in a folder on your desk or something and gather dust. Like you have to create a plan for when are we collecting this data? Who's responsible for it? How are we reviewing it? Because then that lets you know, okay, we said these are the things that we intend to see happen. Did that actually happen? And are we reaching the goals that we intended? So those are two of the biggest ways I think that are most powerful for organizations, that they can actually do this on their own. And then there's another end of like, if you're doing like a large scale evaluation where you may have to actually bring in an external person, if they have a logic model to start from, that makes their job so much easier and they're able to help you get like real clarity and insight if you're needing that sort of extra support from an external evaluator to help you evaluate like the long-term impacts of your program.
So we're getting a little bit towards the end, and I want to make sure I hit this last question, but also fundraising, like funders want to know the impact you're making. If you're using a logic model, you're going to be much more credible, right?
Absolutely. Yep, absolutely. Sometimes I hesitate sometimes to mention funders because that is important. Yes, there are some funders who will require it and does make you better as an organization. Sometimes I've noticed in the nonprofit space, there's a thinking or there's things around like we're doing things because the funder required it. And I want us to be thinking of it as like, this is actually to improve your organization. So yes, they're requiring it, but that's because it's really to help your organization. So yes, to your point, it will make you more credible as an organization if you have a logic model, if you're able to show this is what we're using to guide our work. Here is our data to support this. It does make you a lot more credible in the fundraising world.
And then you said that the logic model can be used to communicate the results of your work internally and externally. Can you address that?
So that's where you're, a lot of times in organizations, we're kind of siloed in our work. Like one team is working on this thing, another team is working on this, another is working on this. Your logic model really brings your team together to understand, here are our key performance indicators. Here are the data that we are going to collect to let us know if we're on track. Then you can use that in your staff, in your team meetings, in various places within the organization so that we're all aware of where we are, if we're on track, if we're not, and what we're going to be doing about it. And you're able to really have a rich conversation within the organization. That could be from your external affairs team, your program team, your CEO. Like there's just so many ways that you can bring in everyone to that conversation. And then of course, there's externally, right? So you have to be able to show to people who are participating in your program, people who may want to participate, like what did we do? Like who do we serve? Or excuse me, who do we work with? Those sort of numbers, but then also getting to the impact. What did all of that mean in people and the changing of their lives? So this is where your logic model, when you're clear about the data that you want to collect and you're clear about who's going to do it, then you also have to be really clear about the communication, having a plan for when you're going to communicate this and how. So that's kind of the fun part, but it's also the part that we forget sometimes. So just so caught up in the collection and working internally that we forget to just really make sure that we're sharing this and we're being really clear and transparent about what results that we've attained.
I think internally it can be good cheerleading.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the other thing is that I'm teaching a storytelling course right now, which is I'm more comfortable with that rather than my eyes glaze over sometimes with logic models. So I'm kind of the other side of things, but marrying data and story, I think is a whole thing too, that we need to be thinking about. Nonprofits are thinking about storytelling more than they're thinking about data collection, I think. But they're equally important. I've had the biggest funder in Texas tell me you have to have both.
Yep.
So, yeah. So.
Yeah.
Anyway, we
Yeah.
are right at 11:15 already. This always zooms by.
It did. It went by so fast, Nancy.
It does. Listen, I want to thank you so much. You're very impressive. Your background is impressive. The fact that you went BA, master's, PhD, and you're so young. I love your energy. I love what you do. Now, I can't remember if you're in the group, but if you're not, please join. And then in today's comments, would you put your contact information if people have some questions? I think they have in the past. So, and we're very grateful to have you. Thank you so very much.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. And yes, I will. I'm taking a bit of a break from social media, but I'll go into the group and just sort of add my information. I'm happy to do that.
Perfect. And my little call to action is that I want to invite those that are attending today, we have a few, to sign up for the few spaces available in my live course for Steps to Powerful Storytelling, and we will see you soon. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Christian.
Yep, no problem. Thank you.
Bye-bye.